Hello, and welcome to my weekly book review. And today, I want to talk to you about Bird Box by Josh Malerman. And here, I'm not only going to be doing a book review, but a book comparison as well, because I have the special editions from SST Publications and Dark Regions Press, and I'm going to show you both of them and give you my thoughts after the book review, of course. So, Bird Box was Josh Malerman's first published novel back in 2014, but I didn't become aware of it until 2018 when it was adapted into a film with Sandra Bullock. So this was my first introduction to Josh Malerman. I listened to the audiobook back in 2019, and I absolutely loved it. Josh Malerman became one of those authors who I was going to buy all his new books no matter what, and I've done that ever since. That being said, almost 4 years later, I've actually physically read the book for the first time, and I'm sad to say it didn't hold up to that first experience I had listening to it, but I'll get to that in a minute. If you're not familiar with Bird Box, it is the story of Mallory as she tries to survive in this world that is inflicted with the problem. The problem are these inexplicable entities that are out in the world, and if you see one, it drives you to madness. It drives you to violence against others, and ultimately violence against yourself, and you commit suicide. And it follows two storylines with Mallory, which are each intercut chapter to chapter. So like one chapter will be the first storyline, the next one will be the other storyline, back and forth, and so on. The first storyline follows her at the start of the problem. She's discovered that she's pregnant, and she's also discovered that the problem exists in the world. So her and her sister are trying to adapt and trying to survive. So one of the ways of being survival is to adapt to blindfolds and getting around blind, because obviously if you're blindfolded, you're not going to be able to see the creatures, which means you're not going to be driven to madness. And this eventually leads Mallory to a household with a bunch of other survivors as they adapt and continue to survive in this world. The second storyline features Mallory and her two children, boy and girl, as they leave their household and take a blindfolded trip down the river, as one normally does when wanting to steer a boat, as they try to make their way to a safe haven that they've heard about. The first thing I will say, as far as reviews go, is that having reread this, or I guess technically read it in print for the first time, since I listened to it the first time, post-COVID, makes this novel, especially the early chapters where she's first interacting with this world, incredibly eerie. Like, seeing society shut down in this novel was shockingly close to society shutting down as it occurred in 2020. And that is one of the strong points of the novel, is that I think it actually holds up better now, after we've had and experienced COVID and lockdowns, and actually holds up better than it did back when I had read it pre-2020. It's like even down to like some characters thinking that the whole thing is essentially a hoax. They're thinking, "Oh, the blindfolds aren't going to help you." I'm like, "Wow, he really hit the nail on the head with precognition." Like, damn, is Malerman a medium? Who knows? That being said, one thing, and this might be simply because I've read other Malerman titles since then. It could be maybe I'm more cynical of a person, but or maybe it's just because I'm physically reading it versus listening to it. But I didn't like the style. I found Malerman, and I guess the words are clearly the same as the ones I listened to 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, but there's so much repetition, and I found the characters to be so annoying the second time around, which, maybe that's going to be, realistic to the characters, realistic to how people would react, but there's so much repetition. Mallory saying, "Oh, what's that over there? What's that over there? What's that over there?" Like, why say it once when you can say it 3 times, right? And that's what I felt kind of happens with this. like it almost feels like, I mean, this wasn't the first novel that Malerman wrote. He talks about in the afterwards how in his afterword how he's written other novels prior to this, but this was the first one published. But it's almost how do I want to say it? It almost feels like your first novel. Like I feel like he's grown as an author since Bird Box, and unfortunately, having read those other novels, and going back to this one, I feel as if it makes the language in this one feel worse because of it. I mean, there are more annoying situations when I read this the second time around. I felt like Mallory was a more annoying character. And maybe that's just me. I still think the novel is definitely worth reading, especially in a post-COVID world. I mean, if you can get past the repetition and the writing style, I think that it's still a very good read. It's a very good story. One of the strong points is that you're never told what these creatures are, what these beings are, what the problem is. So it leads it up to your own invention, to your own imagination. And I think that is definitely where the strong point is in the novel. There's always this underlying sense of dread, of fear, and you are almost going mad in a way, trying to not go mad, and that's, I think, definitely the strong point of Bird Box. But let's get into the actual version discussion here. I mean, seriously, check out Bird Box. Ignore me saying the characters are annoying. Maybe you won't find them annoying. I just happen to find them more annoying the second time around. But it's still a good novel. It's still definitely worth a read. Both these special editions are sold out. So if you do want these special editions, you do have to go to the secondary market. First up, we have our SST Publications. This is from the UK, featuring both dust jacket artwork and interior artwork by Ben Baldwin, who does an incredible job all around. Dark Regions Press here in the US did their own special edition. It's got a larger trim size. This one features Vincent Chong's dust jacket artwork, which I think is the superior of the two dust jackets, but it features interior artwork by Glenn Chadbourne, which I think is inferior to Ben Baldwin's. So they both kind of have their perks, their pros and cons. But seriously, how can you not love Vincent Chong's artwork? That is just superb. Both are bound in cloth, both cloth-bound books. I will say the SST one does seem to have thicker boards, which leads to a little bit nicer cloth. You can almost kind of see it there. And because of that, I would say the better binding goes to SST in that instance. Both are signed by Josh Malerman. The SST version is also signed by Ben Baldwin. There's their signatures there on this beautifully illustrated exclusive signature sheet, which has exclusive artwork. The signature sheet for the Dark Regions Press is artwork that's repeated in the novel itself. Ben Baldwin's artwork, it seems more human. It doesn't have that kind of post-apocalyptic look that Glenn Chadbourne's artwork does. And it helps instill the fear that you're going to be feeling reading the novel. Plus, some of the pieces, like this next one, are in color. So it actually has a combination of color artwork and black and white interiors. I don't want to show you a spoiler, so I'm just going to peek at stuff. There's a dog. Anyways, there's a phone, which I guess is not really a terrifying image, but it can be. Both of them do feature exclusive afterwords and a short story. The short story is Bobby Knox, which is a Bird Box short story. It's the same short story in both, but the afterword is different in both of them. SST definitely wins in terms of the afterword. I mean, we're talking multiple pages here. We're talking like 10 pages. Just kind of by Malerman describing, starting with his experience at the premiere of the film, and then kind of going back and explaining the story of Bird Box in its creation. Whereas the afterword in the Dark Regions edition isn't bad. It's much shorter. It's a much more abbreviated afterword. So here is the signature page in the Dark Regions Press one, which we will see in just a moment. It is the same artwork that Glenn Chadbourne uses right there of the Mallory and kids going down the river. Now, Chadbourne does use a lot of like line art, which is great for some titles. I didn't quite like it for Bird Box here. I thought that this is a post-apocalyptic story, I suppose, but it almost felt too post-apocalyptic, if that makes sense. Buildings and society, particularly in the chapters that take place, right at the onset of the problem, seem too run down. I mean, I guess maybe in the 5 years later portion where Mallory and the kids are traveling through the world, having things be run down makes sense. But in like the, immediate, like this, in the immediate instance after the problem occurs, this feels like many years later. It doesn't make sense for what is happening. Like I said, they do both feature Bobby Knox, the short story, which I had never read before. So Bobby Knox was actually a pretty solid short story. I didn't like the ending. I mean, the ending makes sense, and I can't really say anything without spoiling any with it. But I felt that it was too silly. And I guess that going back, reading this a second time, there are actually events in the novel itself of Bird Box that I did find to be much sillier having read them in print. And I think that kind of detracted away from my enjoyment of Bird Box. I also have to make a remark about this one. When they are traveling down the river, Mallory is told that they will need to take their blindfold off at a certain point because there's going to be a branch. The river's going to branch out in multiple paths. And they need to take the second from the right. And Chadbourne has shown it here in this illustration, and I feel like it detracts from what the text says. I mean, yes, there is technically second from the right, but he only gives you 3 paths, which means it's just the center one. So I feel like it needs to go in more than 3. Otherwise, the guy would have just said, take the center path. Or, just go straight, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to show you the image in Bobby Knox, which is this one right here. No, it's not this one. Bobby Knox actually has 2 illustrations in the Dark Regions Press Edition. The second one does feature spoilers. I'm not going to show you that. Bobby Knox is the story of Bobby. His last name is not Knox. Knox is the action. Bobby is a young boy camping out behind a survivor's home, surviving in his own way and kind of trying to determine whether or not this family is safe enough, the survivors in this house are safe enough for him to make contact and try to survive with. Anyways, a couple of the silly moments, I suppose these aren't really spoilers per se, but things that I thought kind of detracted from it. They do encounter wolves at some point, or maybe they're wild dogs. Who's to say? They could be dogs driven mad from the problem. But the wolf scratches, like it claws Mallory. And I guess I never really picked up on it when I had listened to the book. But having gone back and read it, wolves, like dogs, primarily attack with their teeth, their mouths. They're not really, they use their claws for like digging. It's not like it's a cat. So I felt like that was just silly. I felt like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too literal or too critical of the novel. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it still was a good read. I feel like it didn't quite hold up as well the second time around. Maybe it was just because of me reading it in person. There were a lot of silly moments that just seemed unnecessarily silly for a novel of this caliber that's trying to be a horror novel. Anyways, I don't want to go into spoiler territory or else I would talk about that in more detail. But yeah, definitely check out Bird Box. If you have watched all the way to this 15-minute mark, thank you very much for watching. If you had to pick one of these editions, I would say the SST edition is probably my preferred version of it. I just like the smaller trim size. It's a standard trim size. The oversize is totally fine. It works well. But you're also getting better interior artwork. You're getting better afterword. You're still getting the same novel. You're still getting the same short story within it. But I think that It's a very solid novel. Even with the goofiness aside, you should definitely check out Bird Box if you haven't already. Give Malerman a shot. Some of his later novels, I haven't read everything by Malerman. I actually haven't read Mallory, the sequel to this. That's going to be my next book that I read. But I've read a bunch of other Malerman stories. I've actually done book reviews on a couple of them on my channel that you can check out. A couple of his later novels, his most recent novels, have disappointed me. But like Unmarried Carol is kick ass. Inspection's worth a read. Seriously, you should check out Josh Malerman if you haven't already. Like I said, both of these editions are on the secondary market if you did want to buy a copy. Otherwise, if you wanted to check the novel out for yourself, the trade edition is readily available wherever books are sold. So please check out my channel. I'm doing at least one book review a week. I'm doing two lately because I have to play some catch up. Plus plenty of unboxing videos in between here and there. So please consider liking and subscribing if you want to see any of those. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you around next time.